Good afternoon, everyone. The UQ MBA Careers and Professional Development team would like to welcome our MBA students and alum, also a wider UQ Business School community. I acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands on which we meet today. On behalf of UQ, I pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants, who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. We recognize their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. If you have enrolled in our MBA in the last 18 months or so, you may remember some questions in terms of careers in your enrollment forms, which allow your MBA career services to gather data about your career journey so far, where you see yourself post-MBA, helping us to tailor events and professional development workshops, hence the session today. If you're an alum or enrolled in the MBA program prior to 2019, you may not have come across this. However, we are looking at rolling it to a wider MBA community. If you're an alum or enrolled in the MBA program prior to 2019, you may not have come across this. However, we are looking at rolling it to a wider MBA community. This initiative, a career development program, was first implemented in the UK. In fact, more than 80% of our MBA students in semester 2 2021 were considering a career transition. You were 89% in our February intake, and an astonishing but not surprising 100% for our full-time intake back in January. So we all know that one of the top motivations for obtaining an MBA is to make a career change, or at least weighing the options. So for our MBA students and alum attending today, if you think it's time for a career or job change, there are many things to consider before making any big moves or drastic changes. Employers understand MBAs will be most likely to make a career change. Today, careers are not only projected to extend with life expectancy, but career switching and having multiple vocations is on the rise, as is the compulsion to find ways in which to stand out from the mainstream. In fact, if you've been to orientation, we did mention this in the past, more than 70% of our MBA students and recent graduates change roles during the course of their studies. As discussed many times before, a career change can mean a change of industry, function, location, or a combination of the three. Career switching can also mean starting out on an entirely new business venture with friends or partners. A common motivator for career change comes in the form liking of what you do or part of what you do, but not being 100% happy in the role you're in. Millennials will on average change jobs 4 times in the first 10 years after graduating, twice as much as their predecessor, the Gen Xers. So you might be asking yourself, how do I make a start? One model that I would like to explore with you today is the career diamond, which is a helpful visual aid to show you the process of expansion that plays a vital role in your career search. The beginning of the diamond represents the point at which self-awareness and external awareness about the world of work are limited. The more you are willing to learn about yourself, about your values and beliefs are influenced by cultural and family norms. If you had some one-on-one session with myself, I speak a lot about self-reflection. So that's the beginning of it, basically. Think about what a meaningful career means to you. The same goes with the world of work. Many people have some kind of limited practical knowledge about what a career-specific job within that career actually entails. The process of expansion is fun and exciting, but also can be scary for some people. Wherever you are in the process, you can use some career tools to move forward and get you to a point where you can begin drastically deciding amongst options that fit you well. Career transition is also a process of identity change. Perhaps the first question you need to ask yourself is, what shift do you have to make in your mindset and belief system to start the process of career transition? Now, we spoke about a few tips at the beginning of the webinar. So this slide, which I hope you can see now, is kind of a map for building a successful plan for a career transition. And that can be broken down into 6 easy steps. The first one is to help to identify your next career pathway. break down what you enjoy and do not enjoy doing. The second one around industry research is create a well-rounded job search strategy, undertake industry research, and develop an ecosystem map. Regarding the step number 3, regarding your networks, you need to ensure you have a pipeline of potential contacts who work in your target industry. Just a quick reminder that we've got more than 5,000 MBA alum who did an MBA with UQ in the last nearly 50 years. The point number 4 is around career compatibility. Market research on jobs you are interested to identify any gaps in your current skills and knowledge. Point 5 is around your finalizing your transition. So customizing your resume, update on your LinkedIn, potentially create a job application tracker to see what companies or what contacts you have been targeting, speaking to, so on and so forth. And then the point number 6 is application ready. So ensure you've got your resume and cover letter review. A quick tip, you've got a dedicated and personalized UQ MBA careers team that can help you with that. The model I just showed you before is part of a bigger program, something we developed back in 2020 in semester 1. It's called the Accelerate Your Career program. So if you just joined the UQ MBA, it's something you might want to think about, and if you're looking for a career transition. It's basically a 3-week on-demand, at your own pace, to help you to accelerate towards your career goals by developing a go-to-market strategy. There is 6 different modules that you can do, a very different range of workshops, activities, and learning exercise with the goal to help you with developing your value propositions, learning how to build a plan for transition and growth, develop industry and market research skills, decipher resume and cover letter myth, learn how to get the most out of VMOC, which is a resume AI platform, and also connect with your peers and alums. But enough of me. Now I would like to hear from the people and our panel members who have done the transition multiple times. I would like to ask our panel members to join us, Bianca, Chantals, and Rob, please. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello.
Hi, Chantals. Hi, Rob. Hi, Bianca.
Hi, everyone.
First of all, I would like for perhaps each of you to introduce yourself and give us where you are currently working, review of your career so far, and when did you graduate, or when do you expect to graduate? And I might start with Bianca, if possible.
Absolutely. So I did my MBA in 2018. And before I did my MBA, I'd been in engineering, technical engineering, doing fly in, fly out work. And then just before starting my MBA, I'd taken up the role of being CEO of non-for-profit Youth Without Borders. Now, post my MBA, I ended up getting a job with management consulting firm BCG and spent a few years there before landing my current role, which is in the global strategy team of mining services company Orica, who are the global leader in blasting solutions and cyanide. And this sort of combines both my engineering and strategy background now. Outside of my day job, I have a side business where I do case interview coaching to help people wanting to go into consulting and strategy roles prepare for that part of their interview. And I also spend a lot of time in the non-for-profit space. So I have board positions with Red Cross Australia and Bush Heritage Australia, which is a conservation charity. I'm a global shaper, which is the initiative of the World Economic Forum. And this year I was selected to be part of a global task force called Davos Lab that has built a recovery plan aimed at safeguarding future unborn generations. And that was actually launched last week, so you can go read the report now. And as part of that launch, Professor Schwab, the head of the World Economic Forum, actually sent that report we made to 120 heads of states around the world. And I've also been working with Foundations for Tomorrow to create an Australian youth-led recovery plan. And this is about making sure that the voices of young people are heard as our business and government leaders make plans on how to build back better. So that's launching on September 1st. And it basically amplifies the voices of over 10,000 young Australians and how they want to make Australia a more fair, just, equitable and sustainable place going forward.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bianca. Chantals, would you like to go next? Please?
Yes. So my name's Chantals, and I joined my current company, Prodigus Australia, in January this year. So our company specialises in intelligence expertise, and we do a lot of consulting back into defence and government, but we also do some work with the private sector as well. So my primary role has been around training delivery. So I've done a lot of training delivery in the defence space, and I'm now starting to use my MBA in the actual operations of the business, so working in human resources and financial management as well. So my career transition in January was from the Australian Public Service into Prodigus. So I started in 2007, I started in a graduate program in the APS in Canberra. I worked in sport policy and anti-doping testing for a few years, which I absolutely love because I basically just watched sport all the time, which was a lot of fun. And then I moved into the national security space. So I worked across Attorney General's and the Home Affairs portfolios, did a lot of policy and communication work, and did a 13-month stint at Parliament House in the Minister's office, which was just absolute madness. After that particular role, I moved to Brisbane with Home Affairs, and it was then that I went, I think I want to change. I'm going to be dragged back to Canberra if I stick in the APS and I progress that career. So I need to find a way to stay in Brisbane. How am I going to do that? I need to transition into the private sector, but I don't know anything about business and I don't know anyone in Brisbane. And that was when I decided to do my MBA. So I started that in January last year. I'm a bit over halfway through now, and it was through UQ Networks that I met my current boss, Grant Joy, who started Prodigus last year, and he's also a UQ MBA alumni. So it's a bit of a UQ MBA success story, I guess, our company. So that's basically my story.
Fantastic. Can't wait to use this story even for marketing purposes if possible. Rob, would you like to share your story?
Thanks, Renee. I've been through I guess 3 transitions in my career so far. So I'm also still doing my MBA. I haven't quite finished yet, and obviously with COVID and other things going on, I'm not entirely sure when I will finish, but I'm doing it part-time over 7 years, so I've got a little while yet. The 3 transitions that I've been through in my career, the first one was I was in the Australian Army. I was an aviation engineer working on a range of Army helicopters. The first transition was the transition out of Army into defence industry. Whilst I was in industry, defence industry, I worked as a project manager, and I was there for a few years when I made my second transition, which was moving out of that role, which was something that I knew relatively well, into management consulting. So I went to work for KPMG. And then whilst I was at KPMG, I made my third transition, which was to found my own business, which is Merrigan RAS Consulting. So RAS is Robotics and Autonomous Systems. And as a business, we help other organizations successfully implement their drone programs to reduce costs, to increase capability, or to keep people safe. So we started that in 2017, primarily working back to defence. And in fact, we've done a fair bit of work with Prodigus. So obviously the UQ MBA links are reasonably strong. But we also work in the agriculture sector and commercial aviation sector are our focus areas at the moment. Definitely everything that I've learned in the MBA has been valuable almost at the instant that I've learned it. So I'm happy to talk through all of that as we go.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rob. Feel free, people who are attending, to pop the questions to the Q&A chat box. But I do have a few questions I wanted to ask you all. And I might start with Chantals, since you did the most recent transition. It seems when people are for many years in the same career, they feel very comfortable. And it takes some kind of courage and bravery to change roles. So for yourself, since you changed like 6 months ago, what triggered the change? Like, what was the light bulb moment saying like, oh yeah, I need to do a change? You know, like what was the process for yourself?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And a lot of people have actually come to me for advice, knowing that I've made a career transition. And the thing I say to them is, what are your priorities, not just for your career, but for your life? Because for me, it was actually a lifestyle decision that triggered the entire transition. So I realised that I didn't want to be in the APS anymore because it was going to drag me back to Canberra if I wanted to progress my career there. And I didn't want to live in Canberra anymore. I was done with Canberra winter. And I guess to the APS, I was getting a bit frustrated with the bureaucracy and the red tape. And after having this crazy experience at Parliament House, I sort of had a bit more courage to go, I think I can do something different now. So it was really a lifestyle trigger, and then realising that the priority about having freedom of choice over where I lived and what I did for work and the roles that I was in, that was what was most important to me. So when I realised that, I thought, well, the APS can't offer that to me anymore, so I need to look elsewhere. And it was then that I decided I want to get out of government, I want to work in business. And so that's sort of where the MBA journey started as well.
Fantastic. Bianca, obviously you mentioned you changed careers multiple times. So my question is around planning. What pre-planning did you do before starting your next career paths? Like, what did you do exactly? Like practical tips for our attendees.
I mean, the main two things I did was ask myself 2 questions. So the first is like, what will be next? Not just what's the next role, but what's the next role after that? So especially when transitioning to a different career, like when I was thinking about taking up the CEO role at Youth Without Borders, so engineering to non-for-profits, it's like, okay, if I spend a few years there, what happens after that? Am I aiming for a non-for-profit career for the rest of the time? Or if I wanted to go back to engineering, would that door still be open? Or do I have to limit how many years I'm out before I make that jump back? And thinking that step ahead. The second thing was around considering what my plan B is. So because I don't want to have too big of a gap in my resume if my plan A, this career transition, falls through. So my involvement with the MBA, UQ MBA Consulting Club, I thought, strategy and management consultant would provide a great learning curve for me, but it had really poor work-life balance. So I knew it wouldn't be like a lifelong career for myself. So in thinking through that, I sort of set myself a plan A goal. I'm going to try and get into one of the top 3 firms in the world, McKinsey, Bain and BCG. That is going to be very, very hard, and I will likely fail at that. And if I fail at that, I give it my best shot. What is my plan B? And for me, it was like, as soon as I get my second rejection from one of those 3 firms, I then start applying for engineering roles as well as continuing with that last shot. And that I was happy to go back to an engineering career because I never left it because I didn't like it. I just had other opportunities that I was pursuing.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bianca. Rob, obviously you transitioned from defense to consulting to your own company now. So obviously career change and career transition is not an easy path, as we all know. So can you speak to us about what kind of roadblocks you had during the transitions and how you overcame the roadblocks, the struggles, like what kind of preparations can you take before getting negative answers from potential employers or not getting to where you want to go?
So there's probably 3 things I want to talk about here. The first is identity, the second is self-doubt, and the third is networks. From an identity perspective, when I transitioned out of defense and into defense industry, one of the things that I struggled with the most was a loss of identity and a loss of sense of self. And it was very unexpected. I realized that for the 12 years I'd been in the Army full time, I really placed a lot of my sense of self-worth and my identity in the career that I had. And when I transitioned from that career into a different career and I didn't have that anymore, I struggled with that a lot. And I think for many people, defense is obviously a lifestyle and a career and an identity all in its own. But that identity question is going to be relevant almost regardless of what transition you're making, because a lot of people do place a lot of their sense of self-worth and identity in the work that they do. And when you're making a transition, that changes, and there are impacts to those changes, and in ways that you perhaps are not prepared for. The second is around self-doubt, and this is never something that's visible on the surface. Is one of the biggest obstacles that I faced was myself, particularly in the sense of knowing what I could do and what I couldn't do, and the difference between that and what I believed I could do and what I couldn't do. And it was really highlighted for me when I was going through the process of figuring out what I needed to do to start my own company. And I was talking to my wife a lot and doing the whole engineer thing of overanalyzing. And my wife said, look, at the end of the day, you just need to do it. And that was enough for me to overcome that doubt and take that leap. And the third thing that I wanted to talk about was networks. And obviously the UQ MBA is very good for networks. People often say that an MBA comprises three main advantages. One is the content that you learn. The second is the way that content is taught. And the third is the networks that you develop. And for me, having those networks in Brisbane was critical actually to taking the leap to starting my own business, because the consulting club at UQ MBA, which I think Bianca will speak about maybe a little bit later, but also we, in the initial stages, I was participating as part of a startup group, and we all made a commitment to each other that within 6 months we'd start up our own business, and just having that support and those networks of people who are in a similar mindset and are going through a similar transition has been very, very critical for me in making that leap successfully.
Thank you, Rob. If I was on The Voice, I would be with Team Rob. I always listen to my wife as well, So, Bianca, just had a question. Like, you spoke about student club and consulting clubs, but can you go a bit deeper around what activities or extracurricular activity did you take within the MBA or externally to make it happen? Because again, not easy to make transition from one industry to another.
Absolutely. I mean, from when aiming towards consulting, the UQ MBA Consulting Club was the thing I leaned on heavily. The first year I did my MBA, I was a member, and the second year I did my MBA, I took up a leadership position and was a co-president with the wonderful Joan Norton, who actually now works in strategy at Cricket Australia and lives just 3 blocks away from me here in Melbourne. And the club leadership role allowed me to do at least 3 of the things that you listed, Remy, as part of that building a successful career transition plan. Like, firstly, it expanded my knowledge and gave me really good research on the industry, because like I had to learn that stuff in order to give presentations and deliver that knowledge to the club members. It also helped me build my network. So Joan and I had a series of 6 panels over the year with 3 or 4 consultants present at each. So we had to network our way to find diverse consultants to fill those panels and speak about everything consulting. And lastly, it helped me personally prepare. So like having people to do case practice with, or getting the resources to understand what a consulting resume looked like. And it also gave me credibility in my application. It wasn't just me saying, hey, I'm interested in consulting, but I had action and proof points behind that to show that credibility. So in that year, Joan and I grew club membership by over 100% and had attendance of over 100 MBAs, current students and alumni to our events.
That's amazing. There is some questions rolling into the Q&A, but I just wanted to ask a couple of more questions to each of you also. Chantal, what are the long-term opportunities associated with this new career? Like, where do you see it moving forward? Is it just short-term plan, or are you looking for further extension, basically?
Now I'm in the company, I absolutely love it. So I'm hoping to stick around for a long time. In terms of long-term opportunities, what I didn't have before was that freedom of movement and choice. And now I have that. In my particular role, I'm not just a consultant, I'm also working on how to run the business, which was really important to me, I guess, coming out of doing the MBA. I wanted to actually use those skills in as broad a way as possible. So the two paths I see for myself are potentially going down the operations path, so maybe chief operations officer one day, or potentially focusing more on the consulting side. But because we're a startup business, it's really given me the opportunity to do both. And that was important to me, again, thinking about what my priorities were. I wasn't leaning toward a bigger company. I actually really like the idea of working for a smaller company. And it's sort of been a softer place to land as well, because it's very personal. We all know each other, and we've all sort of come from similar backgrounds. So for those reasons, it's been a great place to land. But I really do feel like my long-term opportunities have completely opened up now that I'm out of the public service. So it's worked out really well.
Thank you. Rob, you are speaking about values. So how has your previous experience helped you with your venture? And how does your current business align with your core values?
So a few elements to that question. So one of the things I've found, particularly in starting a business, is that everything that I've done in my entire life almost has led me to this point. So people talk about the idea of a mountain of value, and part of the process of self-reflection and awareness is understanding what value you bring, or in this case, I bring to the table. And I figured out that my understanding of aviation that I developed through my time in the Army, my understanding of project management, my interest in startups and entrepreneurial work, my love of technology, my desire to make a difference in the world, all of those elements kind of came together in the concept that I had for this company, and all of that value that I've built up over my life has been what's helped to make it reasonably successful. So I think if there was a piece of advice out of that, it would be understand that everything that you've done is useful in some way, and the best way of making a transition is to understand the place where you can add the most value based off the work that you've done.
Fantastic. I've got two more questions for you three, and then we might go to the Q&A questions and go it from there. What practical advice would you give to people eager to make a career change or transition that we haven't spoken about before? Chantal.
My best advice would be to back yourself and your ability to step out of your comfort zone. If you are not used to doing that, if you haven't stepped out of your comfort zone very often in your career or other parts of your life, it can be really unsettling, but that's all part of the process. And you need to trust that you are resilient enough to deal with walking into a new position in a new company, or starting your own company and thinking, oh my God, what have I done? I don't know what I'm doing. Get used to that feeling, because you will have that for a little while, but trust your ability to get through it and actually enjoy it, because you'll come out the other side feeling far more resilient.
How do you build resilience? How do you build that?
How do you build it? For me, I surrounded myself with really good mentors and people that could give me advice and encouragement. And I also found that the MBA itself showed me what I was capable of. So I remember walking into accounting thinking, I know nothing about maths or numbers. I'm going to fail. This will be terrible. And then I actually studied pretty hard and did quite well and went, oh, actually, I can do this. So it was sort of proving to myself that I could stretch myself a bit and actually get something out of it. But I think Bianca mentioned before having a plan. So for me, my plan was just knowing, okay, get out of the public service within a particular time frame, and these are the steps I'm going to take to do it. I'm going to join the MBA, I'm going to lean into networking, I'm going to make some contacts, and then I'm going to figure out exactly what I want to do. And I was very lucky that something came up quite quickly. But I guess having a bit of a plan, having some good people around me, and I guess trusting that I would survive the uncomfortable, scary part, that was all really important.
So Bianca, would you say the best advice you can give to people who are keen to move, to transition careers, industries, is to have a plan?
Yeah, absolutely. And that starts with the things our panelists have said, like looking at what lifestyle you want, figuring out what your values are, asking yourself that question of plan B or what's next after. But something different to add would also be, you only live once and you can give it a go. And if you don't like it, you can boomerang back. I know MBAs who have gone and said, I really want to try this new path. They've made it happen. And then they're like, actually, I really liked my old job. And then they've gone and made a new plan to come back. It's not like this is going to be your life forever. And you've only got one life, so make the most of it.
Fantastic. Rob, what would be the best advice we can give to the community before we jump into the Q&A questions?
Probably the concept that there is no such thing as a ladder. I think that concept of going from one rung to the next and climbing the ladder is a dangerous concept, because it kind of implies that there's only one pathway. And I think the reality is there are no good decisions or bad decisions. There are just decisions. You're on the path that you're on, and whichever path that you're on is the right one. So particularly for those like me that are inclined to kind of over-analysis, whatever you choose, it will be okay.
Fantastic. Thank you. There is a couple of questions in the Q&A chat box. So there is a question from Jane saying, have you thought of changing roles within the same organization? If not, why? Bianca, Chantal, would you like to answer this one?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely consider it, but I think that ladder concept Rob was just talking about, it often feels like there is a specific ladder within organizations, and to get where you want to go quickly, going within the same organization might not be the fastest role, because when that role opens up, you're aiming for a specific role, but for that role to open up, that person has to leave. The likelihood that person's going to leave within your existing organization compared to that role is going to be open within all the organizations outside of your organizations is a bit different. So I think a lot of people have to jump between organizations to get that career progression that they're looking for.
My advice on that would be to have a really good think about what is motivating you to want to change, because if it's a simple matter of, I really like this particular career path and I really like my organisation, but I really want to work in human resources, or I'm really interested in, the accounting and the financial management, I want to work on that. In that instance, if that's the change you're looking for, that might be a great place to start. But if you are motivated by the fact that you hate your current job, it's probably not a good idea to stay in the same organisation. So I would have a really good think about what's really driving the change, what's at the core of it, and that might help to tell you whether staying in your organisation is a good idea.
Would you like to add something else, Rob, on that one?
Just to echo really what Bianca said is, when I was working in defence industry, the plan that I'd set for myself was that I wanted to become managing director, and I came to the conclusion after a few years that the pathway to that was very, very slim. It would have been like jumping through the eye of a needle. I would have had to have a specific career profile. I would have had to move to Canberra, and I would have, I had an aerospace background when I probably needed a maritime background. So it just became almost a calculation to say, if that was the path that I wanted to go down, then I needed to step outside the organisation to progress on the ladder.
Fantastic. Looking at transitioning, and if your values don't align with the organization you work for values, and same way differently, same way vice versa, could you consider like a short-term contract in this case? Is it something you would say like that will take me out of the organization, getting me to where I want to go?
I think the answer to that is it really depends. So Chantal put it reasonably clear, is where are you trying to go? What's the pathway that you're looking for? If that looks, whatever that direction is, there are many different ways of getting there. It might be unpaid work. It might be going and, volunteering at a particular organisation for a week. It might be talking to people to get an understanding of what it looks like. It might be taking a short-term contract. It might be taking an adjacent role in a similar organization. There's many different ways of getting to the same outcome, and there's no right way necessarily.
Would you say, Bianca, Chantal, that a short-term contract is one of the options as well?
To provide a tangible example, I mentioned Joan Norton, who's also a UQ MBA alumni who has done this transition. So she started her MBA as a vet. She was running a veterinarian clinic hospital. And she wanted to get into sports strategy, which is where she is now. And the stepping stone role she took to get there was actually to go into a sport accelerator startup in like a program management position. So that was not where she wanted to end up, but it was a step in the right direction. And because vet and sports strategy is so far apart, any step in the right direction was a step she was willing to take.
I was actually speaking to one of the MBA alum this morning or yesterday around a role, and actually this particular person took a short-term contract after being in the same organization for 6 years or 7 years just to get to where he want to go. So I do believe that short-term contract is sometimes the solution. There is a question around purely transition. So is going from industry to consulting and transitioning back to industry a common occurrence? Do you see value in that approach? Might go with perhaps Bianca on that one, please.
In what I've seen, it is common. Some people get into consulting and they love it and they stay there forever. Some people go into consulting just to pick up like that consulting strategy skill set for a few years and then take it back to industry to help them climb the career ladder there. So it really just depends on the purpose and like why the person and the purpose for them joining the consulting industry.
What do you think, Chantal or Rob?
So could you just repeat the question for me?
Like, is transitioning from industry to consulting and then looking at transitioning again from consulting to industry a common trend? And do you see any value for yourself doing that kind of approach, or for the organization you are currently working for?
Yeah, I guess the value in consulting is that you can be exposed to a really broad range of topic areas. I guess it depends which company you're working for, but you might develop some expertise around things you never thought you would learn about, and then you can take those skills forward if you find an industry that is of particular interest to you. For me personally, I'm working in consulting at the moment, but I wouldn't rule out a move into industry in the future. But the great thing about the consulting role is that I can sort of get this broad view of a whole heap of different stuff and learn about what I'm interested in.
Fair enough. Rob, what would you say?
So when I was at KPMG, one of the observations was that it was very rare that somebody would come in as a junior consultant and work their way all the way up to partner. At all levels, there was value in having external experience. And so people coming and going was very, very common. People coming and going, and in fact, at times coming back was very common.
So do you think that your new career plan fit into your life purposes in terms of aligning with your values, in terms of stepping stone? We spoke about ladder, transitioning, and I can see that you are knowing your head. So does it fit right now with what you want to do, or is it just one step?
For me, absolutely. I've found a company that aligns with my personal values, and it enables me to continue to contribute back to, I guess, work that I was working on in my public service role. I can now still do that, but with the flexibility of working for a small company and having the opportunity to do, I guess, multiple different things in that company. So absolutely, that was a really important part of my decision to join this company. And it has proven to be successful because I can see that everybody at the company, all of our values aligned, and we are all on the same mission. So that's been fantastic for me.
Fantastic. There is a couple of more questions in the Q&A and a good one around managing risk. So do you think there is a right amount of time to take before making the job? Like, is there a risk moving too quickly, or either missing out on suitable jobs that pop up, or maybe you don't have done enough diligence regarding the company of the role? So how do you assess, like, how long do you need to take the job, basically? How long did it take you, Bianca?
I mean, I was pretty lucky. I sort of slowly did it through the MBA Consulting Club over 2 years. I guess, like, the 2 points there are, you know, if you're taking the jump into a new role, like that role's confirmed, like I said before, you can always boomerang back, so that's not an issue. But also, you know, the hardest part of a career transition is getting that person that believes your skills are transferable, and taking that risk on you to give you that role. So if you've got a job opportunity now that is aligned with where you want to go, I'd probably advise somebody that was asking me for advice to go for it, because you might not find that person and that role again in a short amount of time.
But I'd say for that one, no, there's not a right amount of time. And I think exactly as Bianca's kind of said a few times is, if you know where you're going, then you know whether a role aligns with where you're going. And some of these opportunities are fleeting. And if you know where you're going, you can move very, very quickly. So the KPMG role that I applied for, I knew where I wanted to be. I knew it was aligned. And when I saw it come up in my email, I applied for it immediately. So within an hour, I'd made the decision about what I needed to do, because I'd spent an awful lot of time beforehand thinking and preparing. And in fact, the MBA helped me do a lot of that thinking, because it was, where do I want to be? What do I want to do? Where do I feel that my value is? And so when you see an opportunity that aligns with all of those, then you can move as quickly as you need to. And I'll also just say what I said before, there is no right or wrong answer. Even if you do months or years worth of preparation, you could walk into a role that isn't right for you, or vice versa. You could do, 10 seconds of preparation and find a role that's absolutely perfect for you. So it just depends.
Chantals?
I think I agree with what Bianca and Rob have said. There's no perfect time. I guess, as I've said before, it sort of comes back to knowing what your priorities are and what you want to get out of the new position. And if it ticks those boxes, it's probably the right time. The timing will never be perfect, and you can't predict the future exactly. You can do some research and be comfortable with knowing what your priorities are and what you want to get out of the role and what they can offer you. But ultimately, you do need to take a little bit of a leap of faith when you're going into the unknown. So there isn't always going to be an element of that. But I definitely recommend, knowing what your no-goes are. And, that's different for everyone. It might be a salary issue for lifestyle. It might be, flexibility of lifestyle, those sorts of things. So think through all of those little things first. And if they line up, then it's probably a good idea to jump at it.
So that's a question for all of you, but the last 18 months have been slightly a roller coaster. So do you think in this current situation, even though when you feel you don't have a passion or your values don't align with the organization you're currently working for, do you think it's the right time to move now? Do you think it's a good job market? Can you see that from your own experience?
I think, again, an engineer's answer, it depends. One of the things I will say is, if you take the position that no role is a bad role, and in every role there are things that you can learn, in every role there is value that you can add, and in every role there's skills and learnings that you can take away, then you're going to get the most out of whatever role that you end up in. So, if through circumstances you feel like there are fewer options than you'd normally prefer, and you take a role that maybe doesn't quite align with where you'd like to be, you can still treat it as a learning role, and you can still get a lot out of that role. And in fact, often when you speak to people about their careers, sometimes those roles that they didn't think would fit end up fitting really well. So it doesn't, just because it doesn't necessarily fit with your long-term passion doesn't mean there's not a lot you can get from it, and doesn't mean that it may not be right in the long term.
Would you agree, Chantals, since you made the move like 6 months ago?
I did. And, it was a little bit scary because the APS is a very stable, safe place to work. And I was an essential worker during COVID. So to leave that sort of stable employment during a pandemic into a startup company, that was a bit scary. And I guess, again, it was thinking about, well, what can I get out of this role? As Bianca has said, I could always go back, and I was assured of that by a lot of people I work with. If it doesn't work out, you can go back. It's not a forever choice. And I think, for me, this is a long-term role for me because I love the company and I love what I'm doing. But the job that you take next, it might not be the forever job. It might be the stepping stone to what you want. And as Rob said, you can always look for positives. There's always something you'll take out of it. Maybe you'll just learn, no, that's definitely what I don't want to do. That might be enough of a lesson, but you can always take something out of it.
There was a very nice comment from Ryan regarding something that he's currently working on, which is the lack of confidence. And when do you start building the confidence of, okay, I need to take action now? So is there a few tips you can provide to to our audience in terms of building on the confidence? I know we spoke about resilience, like getting negative answers or roadblocks, but what would you say in terms of building on the confidence?
One thing, if you can find it, is find like a partner, a buddy that is trying to do the same thing and meet up with them weekly. Like when I was looking for my transition out of BCG into my next role, I found a friend in my network who was also job hunting, and we met once a week and like kept each other accountable. Like, what are you going to do this week to progress? And then you have that person being like, but you're really good at this and this and this. You should apply for that role that you found, and somebody that you can bounce ideas off.
Rob?
So two things. One is, if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't. One of the things that being in the army taught me really clearly was that the mental attitude that you take into something really affects your performance and your outcomes. So it is important to look at how you're talking to yourself and make sure that you are reinforcing what you're trying to do and that you do believe in yourself. And the second is be okay with rejection. So plenty of people will say no. I've applied for many, many different jobs, and they, often you hear nothing or they say no, and it's hard not to take that personally. But at the end of the day, it's a filter for you to find that right job and to find what you want. So just because you don't get something that you're after doesn't mean that there's anything bad or wrong about you as a person. And it's important not to get rejected and not to get dejected and not to take it a personal.
Fair enough. Chantals, would you like to add anything on that one?
I would say for me, building my confidence, having a really good mentor helped. I actually spoke to Beck in the careers team, the MBA careers team, and she connected me with a mentor who's now become a good friend of mine, who was really encouraging to say, you can actually make this leap, and help me understand how my skills from the public service in the roles that I had could be translated into other roles that I might be interested in. Once you start to understand how your skills translate, that's a really comforting moment when you think, oh, I actually can apply this really well in this different situation. But definitely surrounding yourself with a good cheer squad and some mentors that are going to give you the sort of encouragement to step forward.
Fantastic, considering as well the UQ MBA Career Services offer a mentoring program between current students and alum. There was one last question. I understand that some of you have to go to other meetings very soon. There was a question regarding building a business, and if we could talk very quickly about it. Did you have any clients line up? That was a question from Sasha. Did you have any clients line up, or did you hunt for new clients, basically?
So I came to the conclusion that I either needed a contract or I needed enough money in my bank account to last until such time as I had a client. And I didn't have the latter, so I needed the former. And I was lucky that I found one, which then enabled me to start my business. So I would say, you know, if you do want to start a business, then just have that in mind. You either need one or the other.
Good advice. Well, I'm well aware of the timing. So first of all, I would like to thank you, Chantals, Bianca, and Rob for joining this webinar today around career transitioning. I would like to also thank Adele and Laura, that you can see that they are working for our marketing department. They have been setting up this webinar in a very short time frame. We will distribute the slides to you. I understand we had some difficulties at the beginning, so I'm very sorry about that, but things happen. So thank you again for joining us, Chantals, Rob, and Bianca. I do hope that the session was useful. We've got a couple of events coming up, Careers in Venture Capital on the 1st of September, hosted by my colleague Beck McIntosh. If you are interested in career transition, you must attend our employer mixer happening on the 23rd of September. We've got 7 or 8 employers coming on campus to speak about their companies, about their roles, and light breakfast will be included with croissants. I'm wondering who made the choice of breakfast. We've also got a professional development morning on the 12th of October, which will be great. And we just secure McKinsey on the 26th of October. Thank you all for attending today. At the end of this webinar, we'll have some questions for events for you to answer. So thank you all. We hope to see you soon on campus or online. Take care, merci, and au revoir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.